everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be playing with the new palette from Makeup by Mario. This is the newest addition to his Master Mattes. This is the neutral palette. And I went ahead and picked this up on the Sephora website. This palette retails for $50. You get 12 neutral matte eyeshadows. This palette is being described as a one-of-a-kind neutral tone eyeshadow palette with 12 creamy buildable shades curated for every skin tone with a feather light matte finish. I went ahead and created this eyeshadow look using this palette, and I will be doing some swatch comparisons of this palette next to other palettes that I have in my collection that might be similar in tone. I do need to mention, I did have the Makeup by Mario, the Master Mattes palette, the original. I'll put the image right up here on the screen. I did have that palette, but I actually gifted it to my daughter, so I don't have it anymore. It was a palette that I didn't use a lot, and she liked it and wanted it, so I gave it to her. So I won't have that palette to do comparisons to this palette in this video, but I do have the Ethereal Eyes from Makeup by Mario. I also have the new one from Kim Kardashian in her new skin makeup line. This is the Classic Mattes eyeshadow palette, so I will compare them, even though the tones are really not going to be the same, because you can tell that this one has a lot of like warm and cool tones, whereas this one from Makeup by Mario is definitely just neutral tones, which is not a bad thing. Like, I'm gonna be honest with you, when I first saw this, I was really happy to see a solid neutral palette. The matte shadows kind of reminded me of the Glam palette from Natasha Denona, even though they're probably a little bit more cooler tones in the Natasha Denona Glam palette, but they're very similar, so I'll definitely do some comparisons there. So let's go ahead and jump into the tutorial, then we'll get into the comparisons and I will share those swatches with you, and then I will jump into my final thoughts. So I will see you guys then. Let's go ahead and dive into this palette. I'm gonna first go into this shade right here, just because I put a little bit of concealer on my eyelids as kind of a base, and it's a little creasy. So sometimes taking, oh, that's a lot of pigment. Wow. Sometimes taking a nice like nude or very bright, very bright eyeshadow can kind of cover some of, oh, and it just got my new lashes all dirty. So I just put on brand new lashes today. And yeah, I would suggest tapping off because quite a bit comes off. I don't know if this will show up on camera. Maybe do it in front of me. It's a lot of kick up. So I would suggest tapping off. It's a really light color. So what I'm going to do to kind of tone it down a tiny bit, I'm going to go into this shade right here, right next to it. I'm going to grab the Makeup by Mario black eyeliner. This is the Master Pigment Pro Pencil in Super Black. And I've sharpened it. I'm going to go right here at the base of my lashes. Now, I like this eyeliner to kind of build up outer corner and blend it out, but I don't like it in the waterline. It's not really a waterline type of pencil. It smudges, which makes it a good eyeliner to apply and blend out, but it does not stay in the waterline. Now we're gonna work in the crease. I'm gonna go into this shade first, and I'm just gonna work this in the crease. Next, I'm going to go into the shade right below it, and I'm going to bring that in the crease. For me, when it comes to doing like an all matte shadow, I'm keeping the brush that I used to put on that lid shade handy so that I can kind of buff out any edges that I get. But in my experience, I mean, you guys know I'm not a makeup artist. I'm definitely just a makeup enthusiast. But in my experience, when it comes to an all matte eyeshadow look, for me, it's all about layering and blending when applying matte eyeshadows. It's just like applying a color, blending it out, going a little bit darker, blending it out. And for me, it's all about blending out any edges before moving on to a darker color. Now I'm gonna go into this shade right here, tapping off, and I'm gonna keep this right here on these outer corners. And then going back to that one brush to kind of blend those edges. I'm gonna take the BK Beauty 209 brush and I'm gonna go in to this shade and I'm going to apply that right here on the outer corner. Going back to that one brush, I'm gonna buff those edges. By the way, this brush that I'm using to kind of buff the edges is the Rephr #1 Max brush. It's a really good brush. I've been using the new palette from Skin. I actually just reviewed this palette, and this is the Classic Matte Eyeshadow Palette. I've been using this a lot recently, and I have been using this brush from Rephr to buff out those edges, and it works so well, especially if you start out with a little bit of like a lighter color, something like these three right here. It really helps to kind of get that color in the bristles so that there's a little bit left over, and as you're picking up the brush to blend, there's a little bit of that pigment still in the brush. It just works really well for me. I'm going to grab a little bit of this color right here, which is a really pretty cool tone pink, and I'm gonna sweep that into the crease just to give it a little bit of color. These shadows kind of remind me of like an ABH formula. You can see that the formula definitely has that powdery texture, but I'm okay with that. As long as they blend, I'm fine with them being powdery. Like I can live with it, right? Now I'm gonna grab a little bit of this shade and I'm gonna sweep that into my lower lash line. I'm gonna go in with this shade right here. Same thing, I'm just kind of layering it on the lower lash line just like I did on the upper. I'm gonna go into this shade with a smaller brush. This one is the smudge brush, the E21 from Sigma. And I'm gonna focus that like right at the lash line. Now I'm gonna take the 203 from BK Beauty. I'm gonna go into that mauve color and I'm gonna bring that all along that lower lash line. I'm gonna go back to that Makeup by Mario eyeliner in the black. And I want it to just be dark right at the lashes. I'm gonna go in with that smudge brush from Sigma. I'm gonna go into the black. Just gonna put that right over top. I wanna take, this is the Sigma crease shader brush, the E47, and I'm gonna go into this dark color right here, and I'm just gonna go like right above that line, just following the symmetry of my eyes. Okay, so I goofed with the eyeliner on this side. So you can kind of see where this is higher, like I put too much right here, where this side doesn't have that. I am actually going to take a makeup wipe and just remove right there at that crease, or like right there at the base of my lashes, just remove that. I'm gonna go back into my NARS Soft Matte Concealer with that brush and go right over top of it with that. Now I'm gonna go into that first shade because this was the shade that I used over top of that concealer. And then I'm gonna go into this shade because I used that over top of that concealer. Again, layering. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and throw on some mascara and I will be right back. Let's go ahead and jump into my final thoughts. I'm just gonna first talk about the overall palette. This palette I am happy to have in my collection, only because I do really like the neutral tones. With these tones, this is a palette that you can reach for with any type of shimmer shadow that you're looking for. I can tell that there was a lot of work put into choosing these actual tones to make sure that majority of them are neutral, and I really like this palette. I do. I think it's a good addition to Makeup by Mario's brand. I think this is a nice palette, especially to pair, like if you have the original Masters Matte palette and you love it, I think it'd be nice to have this one to kind of pair with it. But I would personally use this one over the Master Mattes. Now, the formula is a little, you get quite a bit of kick up. And I kind of had that experience with the Ethereal palette. I get quite a bit of kick up with these mattes as well. So it's something to kind of take note of as far as if you're someone that don't really like a lot of fallout. You guys saw how much fallout I got on my eyelashes. I would just recommend tapping that brush off just to make sure that, you know, because the formula is more of that powdery texture, just, you know, tap your brush off and you won't get as much fallout. Now, I will say this palette is very similar to the mattes that are in the Glam palette. Just as I mentioned in the intro, I filmed the intro prior to me like swatching and stuff, and that was the palette that kind of came to my mind when I first saw this neutrals palette from Makeup by Mario. I felt like that it might be similar to the Glam palette just as far as like those matte tones go, and it is. That's not a bad thing. First of all, if you love the Glam palette from Natasha Denona, I think you would absolutely love this neutrals palette from Makeup by Mario. And I actually think they would pair really well together, meaning that if the Natasha Denona Glam palette doesn't have a neutral matte that you're needing, you will probably find it in this Master Mattes neutral. So they will pair very well together. Now, I also think it would pair really well with the Ethereal palette. So if you have the Ethereal palette and you love it, these two I think will pair so well together. And I like the mattes in the neutrals better than the mattes in this palette. And to be honest with you, I don't really like these. These have kind of got hard panned on me, and I don't really love these three shades right here. They just don't work as well as they did when I first got them. Yeah, they're definitely, I know that they're for that ethereal look, right? Where you kind of give that sprinkle of sparkle, if you will. But I don't really use this palette very often, but that's just on a personal level. If you love this palette, I think you'll love pairing it with this neutrals palette. I am looking forward to what palette he launches next. And I kind of hope that it's not these ethereals. I just don't personally like them. I don't love 3 of them in a 12 pan palette, right? We only have these 2 shimmer shadows down here, and then all 3 of these, I just didn't feel the need for all 3 of them in a palette like that. So I am looking forward to what he launches next as far as more of a shimmery palette. I'm sure whatever he launches, you'll be able to pair it with this neutrals. It's a nice palette, it is. The formula is quite creamy. It does have that creaminess to it where they're really easy to blend. And when it comes to doing an all matte look, like I'm wearing right now, you want those shadows to be very easy to blend. For me personally, when I'm creating just an all matte look, I like the layering aspects of putting tones together and layering them to build that dimension within the matte eyeshadow look. This palette definitely offers that, and it kind of takes me back to the 90s. It really does. When I was first getting introduced into makeup and I was wearing all matte eyeshadows, it is kind of fun to go back to that time. Like, this is a palette that I will continue to use frequently, and I like that it's smaller. It's just a little bit easier to travel with, and I'm really, really happy to have it in my collection. There's not really a lot of eyeshadow palettes that I've been really interested in recently. This one, because of the color story, I was very intrigued, and I really am happy to have it in my collection. By the way, before I go, I know that I said that my next video would be this foundation review, and believe me, oh my gosh, this week has been crazy around here, crazy, crazy. Anytime I plan to do it, something comes up and I have to leave and I'm gone. And anyway, so I am working on it and I know exactly how I feel about it. I just need to be able to film my 12-hour wear test. And so I am planning on doing that very, very soon. Thank you for being patient with me. Anyways, that's it for this review. I do hope that the review, the tutorials, the swatches, and everything was helpful. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me in today's video. I hope you guys all have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys all in my next video. Love you. Bye.